everybody. Welcome to the county seat today. I'm your host, Chad Booth. We recently attended the 30th Rural Summit down in southern Utah and met one of their keynote speakers. I asked him to stay over for an interview. We are sharing that with you today. His name is Doug Griffiths. He is an MBA and he is a community builder, which is a unique title. He did not show up with hammers and a tool belt, but his presentation is very good. He's the author of a book called 13 Ways to Kill Your Community, and we appreciate your taking the time to share that with us today.
Thank you.
So why did you decide to call your book 13 Ways to Kill a Community as opposed to Build a Community?
You know, in one of the chapters I talk about how important beautification is and giving that first impression that makes people interested in the community. And we took the same sort of approach with this book. I could have called it 13 Strategies for Building a Successful Community, and no one would have read it. I don't know that I could have got through writing it. The title itself grabs people and gets their attention, and fundamentally I tell the story about how I would go talk to high school students about how to be successful in life, and they you know, I tell them, study hard, don't do drugs, marry someone nice, and they'd smile and say, yeah, we know. But they didn't do anything that changed fundamentally their lives. So I would instead ask them to describe what it would look like if they ruined their lives. And they'd say something like, I'd become a drug addict. And then I'd say, okay, let's pretend that's your goal. You want to ruin your life. How would you start today? And you know, they're high school students, so one of them would put up their hand and say, I'd smoke a joint after school, and two kids would turn red because that's what they did yesterday, right? And then we know, you know, you smoke a joint doesn't mean you're going to become a drug addict, but it's the first step to take if you want to fail at life or do something dramatic, right? And so all the students started realizing, they started analyzing every decision they made for the long-term consequences. And it was the same thing with communities. I went in and talked about what they needed to do with health, education, community infrastructure, economic development, youth, seniors, tourism, arts and culture, wastewater, all the gamut of things that make communities successful. But then I watched them do things that sabotage their own success. So I started to talk about those decisions and how they impacted a community, and it sort of turned into a presentation about what we're doing to sabotage our success, and that's why the book has the title.
What motivated you to do this in the first place? I mean, as you talked about it, you know, you come from a farming family. How come you decided to become, you know, a big public figure?
Well, I didn't decide to become a big public figure, but I mean, I was a rancher and then I was a teacher, and the teaching subsidized my ranching habit, and life was great. But then I ranched in one community, I lived in another, and I taught in another. And I realized all three of them were suffering. Their economies were suffering, the population was declining, and I started to worry about their future. So I started to shoot my mouth off about the need for rural community building, and I shot my mouth off one too many times, which is how I got into the equivalent of state politics, and I served in 5 cabinet portfolios and always worked on community building, and then I resigned a couple of years ago just to go back to this. So it was never about doing anything that would make me famous, but it was about building communities, because I honestly think that is the most important job on earth.
We're now at 13 Ways to Kill Your Community, and you lay them out one per chapter apparently in your book.
Right.
What's the biggest commonality of short-circuiting community growth or deterioration of a rural community?
You know, it's attitude. First, everyone always asks me which of the 13 ways is the worst one, and you can kill a community with any of the 13. But what's more important than each of the chapters is the attitude that underlines all of them. And it's interesting how we wind up sabotaging our own success because we take what we want most, and every community has these long-term plans on what they want most. They have strategic plans and economic development plans, and yet they make decisions that trade away what they want most for what's easy and convenient now, and that's what the challenge is. And it requires a different mindset to undo that, because with the wrong attitude, we make choices that make us feel good now, but don't necessarily benefit us in the long run. And that's why underlying it all that ruins a community is attitude.
Well, doesn't part of that generate from the fact that the guy's got, you know, he's elected as a community leader and he wants to be reelected, so he does the low-hanging fruit first?
Yeah, and that's a challenge.
Okay, well, that's a good place for us to stop. We'll be right back. We'll come back and talk to Doug Griffith more about 13 ways to kill your rural community. We'll be right back.
look south to adventure. Look south to beauty. Look south to San Juan County. Out here, the road goes on forever, and what you'll find will change how you see the world. Climb on your OHV and discover forgotten landscapes and vistas that challenge the imagination. From Blanding and Monticello to the cliff faces of Monument Valley, we're open and ready for you to explore. San Juan County, Utah's Canyon Country.
There's a little place on a Utah map where I was raised, where my heart's at, where the sagebrush grows wild and high, and the stars come out at night. Oh, there ain't nothing like being raised in the basin with a Ute reservation, skiing starvation, that Duchesne County life.
ATV? Check. Four-wheel driving? Check. Bouldering? Check. Mountain biking? Check. Hiking? Check. River rafting? Check. Adventure is about more than just crossing activities off of a list, but hey, if you can find a place that gives you everything you're looking for, all the better. In Emery County, you'll find the San Rafael swell, trails, lakes, and the small-town hospitality you're looking for. San Rafael Country, in the heart of Utah. Visit us and check something off your list.
Welcome back to the County Seat. We're having a conversation today with Doug Griffiths, who has written this great book, 13 Ways to Kill Your Community, and they sound like rural communities to me. So I want to ask you a question. Does anybody ever, why, when you wrote this book, did you not use case studies? Because it sounds really specific, but I don't know who these people are.
Right. Well, I did. There's stories about what's happened in communities because serving in all those cabinet portfolios and traveling all over North America, people would always come up to me and, after I'd originally done the presentation, and they'd look over their shoulder to make sure no one was listening, and then they'd say, guess what we did? And they'd tell me a story about what they'd heard, and I'd ask around and find out it was true and flesh out the story more. And so I tell them in story form without naming any names, so they're not official case studies, because as soon as you name names, it's very easy to say, oh, that's what that community does. We don't do that. But when I tell the stories without names, people always come up to me after, even today, several did, and said, did you write that about us? Because we're doing them all, or we're doing at least 8 of them. And I mean, I was called and asked to come to Texas to speak a few years ago, and I couldn't go. But the person who called and invited me, she said, I know the community you're talking about in chapter 7, I think it was the 3rd story. And if I guess right, will you admit it's them? Like if I guess the name of the community? And I said, sure. So she guessed her hometown in Texas. And I said, no, that's not them. And she called me a liar. She actually said, you're lying. You wrote exactly what we did in that community. And I was ready to photocopy my passport to show her I hadn't been even in the United States any time around then, because we all do these things. These are about, the book, the stories are about human nature and how we undermine our own success. So, and it's not meant, none of the book and none of the stories are meant to be critical, to point fingers and blame. I tell them in a jovial way so that people sort of laugh and realize, oh, we're doing that, I'm doing that. And because the purpose is not to point fingers, it's to just quit it and start working to build a community instead of sabotage it.
I could be a community leader in a small town or a county in rural Utah and read this and go, oh, I guess that is us. But to adapt the change, to get started, what do you have to do?
Yeah, well, that's tough, especially for leaders within the community, whether they're elected officials or administration or volunteer leaders or people from the Chamber of Commerce. It's tough because first you have to recognize that step 1, like anything else, is recognizing that what you're doing isn't working anymore. Mm-hmm. And then step 2 is agreeing you need to change, and step 3 is putting it into action. But that first step is the hardest one to take because 1, most people don't want to admit it. that there's challenges and that it's not working. And two, the last chapter is don't take responsibility. It is so common for us to point fingers at somebody else and say, you fix it. And it becomes challenging for local leadership because the second they stand up and say, we need to do something different, people have a tendency now to sort of point fingers at them and say, no, you fix it, you make it better, do it right now. I tell people we used to go to church and pray for a miracle, and now we show up at the local office and demand one to be made right now. But it takes the whole community to do it, which is why I travel around North America speaking, because somebody usually says, we need to do this. How do we start? And they bring me in to be that outside person to sort of instigate the discussion and the debate. And that's what it takes, is someone to instigate it.
How long have you been doing this?
I probably started doing the first presentations back in 2008. And of course, every time I did it, I'd get new stories, so it's constantly evolving. But
so have you gone back to revisit any of those communities? Has anybody actually turned the ship around?
Yeah, there are lots of communities that have. One of the, I guess my pride and joy is Craig, Colorado, Moffat County.
Mm-hmm.
We were there, it was just 2 days, and we did the presentation, and then we helped all the community organizations work through what the future would look like and what they could do. And it wasn't us. I mean, we get credit for it, but it was local leadership that said, would you come in and help us, and instigated the debate, and they've continued to drive it. The city councilor, John Ponigvar, and then Frank, the county commissioner. I mean, they've continued to push it forward. And every week there's a new column or an article that talks about some new initiative and success they're having. And it's been 8 months or so, but they are really driving change in that community for the better.
Excellent. Well, we're going to take a quick break here. We're going to come back and continue this conversation. Try and turn this into a primer for some of you local leaders and communities, not necessarily the elected official, and how you can start looking at a self-reliant way to change your rural community. We'll be right back.
What would you do with an extra day in Utah Valley? Explore the Wasatch Mountains? Snap a family photo at Bridal Veil Falls. Cool off on Utah Lake or the Provo River. No matter what you're searching for, you can find it in Utah Valley. Bring everyone together.
Too often we find ourselves in shoes like these, or these. Wouldn't it be nice to change into something more like this, or this? How about these? Put on whatever shoes you prefer and come to Beaver County. We have exactly the adventure you need to put under them. So the next time you want to change out of these, come to Beaver County where you can jump into a pair of these. Beaver County, Utah. Lace up for adventure. If you're looking for gold at the end of the rainbow, you'll probably be disappointed, because in Paiute County, the only thing you'll find at the end of a rainy day is the promise of adventure. Highway 89 is your access point through Marysville and the historic trails of Bouillon Canyon. Find yourself in the mountains 1 minute and the desert the next as you follow in the footsteps of the pioneers. Whitewater raft, fish, hike, all within a few minutes of a comfortable bed and a warm meal. Find out why the world has made Paiute County its off-road destination. Paiute County, the place where the rainbow ends.
Welcome back to the County Seat. We're talking with Doug Griffiths, who snuck across the border, legally I might add, from Canada, who has developed kind of a specialty on helping communities see how they are choking themselves off, particularly a very important topic in rural Utah right now as we try to get everybody on a level playing field, as has been discussed a great deal in the last few months. So, how does a community turn this from just somebody talking about this to turning it into an action item?
Yeah, well, it takes time. Too often the biggest challenge we have is that people are looking for a magic bullet. And so that's why they look to the state, or they look to the federal government, they look to somebody else to work that miracle and just fire off that magic bullet that will kill the beast, right? But it takes more than that. In fact, one of the biggest challenges we have, I think, is that too many communities, they actually put up barriers to their own success. They say, well, we can't do anything until, and usually it's we can't do anything until we have enough money. But you can do all sorts of things to make communities better. Money can come in and be an issue, but too often we start there, and it should be the last step in solution making. So you need to get the people of influence together that are really interested in driving the community, come up with a real concrete plan that starts with what's an issue now, not, if 10 years from now this is our goal, what can you do right now to start to fix it? And you build up momentum and capacity. One community we worked with, they were trying to start to build up momentum, and they did this 2 lists exercise I talk about in the book, where they listed everything great in the community, and they listed everything that needed to be fixed. And they started with the smallest thing at the top of the list, which was painting the playground equipment. It was the slide that was actually an issue. And word got around that that's what they'd done, and a few guys showed up and said, what's this list about what needs to be fixed? And went and looked at the list and saw the playground equipment and said, take it off the list, we'll do it this weekend. And I mean, they told the story. They said 3 of them got a case of beer and went down and painted the playground equipment and had a lot of fun. One guy even said, my wife was saying, you were going to clean out the garage today. And he said, honey, I'm doing community service. Right? And so how could you argue with that? And they had fun, and they had so much fun, they went and did it again. And then another group came in and did the 3rd one on the list. And in the end, after a year of doing this, and they kept revising the list, the town administrator, the town manager told me that they started off with everything had to start with money. But by the time they had got through this, they were doing things that they never thought they would ever accomplish with all the money in the world. And they were doing it without money because people in the community were suddenly decided they were going to build one, whether anyone else wanted to help with money or not. And so it takes momentum, and it takes time, and it takes starting with a small group of people that are motivated and spreading that new psychology, that positive attitude through the community that they can make their fate successful.
Okay, so let's take a couple of issues that come up. One I hear a lot in Utah. Our biggest problem, and the reason our community is dying, is we can't keep our young people here. Yeah. Out-migration of youth. All right, what's your answer?
Okay, so I tell everyone that, and again, there's a whole chapter just on youth, because the first thing people always say is, Doug, how do we keep young people in our community? And I tell them that's the wrong attitude. Because I'll go to your community and I anticipate I'll see young people chained up to mailboxes and light posts so they can't get out of town. That's just, the nature of youth is to go off and explore, to go experiment, to try new things, to learn new things. You hope it's not bad stuff, but that's the nature of youth. Your key to success is not to keep them. It's to let them go explore, but to give them a reason to come home when they're done exploring. And I call those boomerang strategies, right? Because you throw a boomerang with the right momentum, it'll go out and it comes back to you. And that's what you need to anticipate with youth. They'll go off to university, they'll go off and try new jobs, they'll go off and travel, but you want to keep up connections to make sure that they want to come home. And there were a few communities that got together beside bought like a duplex, a housing apartment, small apartment by a university, and they constantly interviewed their high school students when they're graduating about what they wanted to do in the future. And every time they found someone who wanted to become a professional that they needed in the community, they would offer them free housing or accommodation. They got a dentist that way. They found out a young high school student wanted to be a dentist. The community needed one, so they said, we'll give you free housing at the university if you come back and practice dentistry when you're done. And of course she said no, but when they offered it to her parents, they said, you're damn right you are. And so she went off, fell in love, finished dentistry school, brought her husband back, and set up a practice. And so they were very progressive on giving them a reason to come home. And there's 100 strategies. I list a bunch of them in the book you can implement to give young people a reason to come back. But fundamentally, we have to realize that it's in the way we talk about our community. How many communities do we have where if you listen to the coffee shop talk, people are saying, this community's dying, there's no hope, why would you open a business here? And then they wonder why young people leave. Well, you chase them out of town by telling them there's no hope, and then wonder why they don't come back. So you need to change the way you talk about your community, and that's why it's all about attitude.
Okay, we can't get anybody to move here. We can't get any new blood. What's the answer to that one?
Well, the first, you see, why can't you get anyone to move here? Instead, you need to ask yourselves, what do we have that would lure someone in to move here? Because the presumption is already, we can't get anyone, so why bother trying? The question needs to be, what do we have that would make people want to be here? And then, instead of trying to blanket market to all of Utah or all of Western United States about attracting people to the community, find out what makes it unique, what's missing. Maybe there's a professional business, a new business, and some entrepreneurialism that you need, and instead target someone who would be interested in setting up that hardware store or that person who would be a dentist. Find them, go get them, instead of just marketing, hey, come to our community, because I mean, that's like the shotgun approach. And then if you realize we have a lot to offer and you keep saying that, you'll lure people in.
So what do you do when you get a group of people that move in and they say, this is a really unfriendly community, I can't get anywhere?
Yeah, well, that happens everywhere. I explain to people, you know, we have lies we tell ourselves, right? I said during the presentation, people believe they're above average lovers. They believe they're above average good looking. They're above average drivers. Well, we can't all be above average. But
I thought you were talking about me. Excuse me.
But we tell ourselves that, right?
Yeah.
And so we often in our communities tell ourselves we're very welcoming, that we're friendly, because we smile at people on the street and we'll be kind enough to open doors, but that's not welcoming. We're not unfriendly because we're not hurting people and chasing them out of town, but welcoming means actually finding new people in the community and saying, hey, what are your kids interested in for sports? We have stuff. Why don't you come over to the house for a barbecue? We have an association you might be interested in. We get so tied up with the organizations we're involved in and our community groups that a newcomer, it's almost impossible for them to get integrated. And so we're not as welcoming as we think. And lots of new people will move and say it's not a welcoming place. There's some truth to that, and it's up to us to decide to change that attitude and to deliberately be welcoming to newcomers, or you get a reputation for not being welcoming and then people won't move there.
So there are 13 chapters in this book.
Yes.
And every one of them addresses one of these problems.
Yes.
All right. We're going to find out a little bit more about it. We'll be right back with the County Seat, talking with Doug Griffiths, author of this great book. Yes, we don't usually do this, but we will tell you how to get a copy of this book and how to get in touch with Doug before the show's over, because he may be able to help your community out. We'll be right back with the County Seat in just a minute.
There is a place where looking out means looking in, where an impression lasting only a few seconds will be imprinted on a life forever, where courage is forged and innocence rediscovered, where remembering is rewarding and forgetting unforgettable. There is a place where truth is felt and where seeing is believing. There is a place.
Have you ever wanted to recreate the world around you? Add some excitement, culture, adventure? Well, there's no need to remake the world when that perfect combination already exists. Just remember 4 words. Welcome to Weber County. In Ogden, you'll find everything you're looking for, from the top of Powder Mountain to the restaurants of our revitalized downtown. Ogden, Utah. Mountain to metro and everything in between. Visit Ogden.com.
In a place that is beyond words, there is nothing to be said, except take your time in Bryce Canyon country.
Welcome back to the County Seat. We're talking with Doug Griffiths today, who is on loan from Canada to try and tell us the error of our ways in rural communities. Now, a lot of people watching this show, Doug, are people that live in the Wasatch Front and the urban communities, and they're going, so what? Why is this important?
Well, you know, I didn't call the book 13 Ways to Kill Your Town. It's 13 Ways to Kill Your Community because it's about any group of people with a common interest. But so it applies to just about anyone in any, even if you're in a city. But the most important thing about the rural aspect and the rural communities is that I think building rural communities is the most important job on earth. It is foundational to everything that we want to be successful. I mean, you think about it, strong communities make sure that businesses are profitable, that leadership is successful, that people are healthy and strong, that they're well educated, families can take care of themselves, and families can take care of each other. And if you get all those things together, you can't help but build a prosperous nation. So the foundation of building a prosperous nation and prosperous states starts at the community level. And you know, I think sometimes we overlook that because we look at big picture issues without realizing just how fundamental community is to our strength.
Well, that kind of, thank you. That's a good plug for what we do because we believe the most important government is that closest to home. So,
absolutely.
I'm sure that I've got all kinds of people that are very intrigued about your presentation and going, boy, I wish our small town could afford to have a guy like Doug come in here and set the record straight and tell the Chamber of Commerce what they need to do, because I'm certainly not going to tell them as their elected leader. How do they go about that?
Well, our website is 13ways.ca because we're in Canada, so it's CA, 13ways.ca. And it has all of our information there. You can order the book on there. I write a weekly column that complements the book on new issues, which you can search and find issues relevant to you. We have all sorts of tools on there, more videos that you can use. In fact, the 13 Ways presentation is broken up by chapters so people can access it. And I did, after I was done the presentation here, I think I've got at least 20 business cards in my pocket, and even someone from the state said, you should come and do a tour. And I'm doing a tour in Washington in September, in Texas too, another one in Ontario in October. So it's very easy when I come and do 7 or 8 communities over a week. And then if I do, I usually bring my family so we can holiday. And it's this beautiful country. I hope you guys realize and appreciate just how beautiful it is here. I can't wait to bring my family back.
Excellent. Well, thank you. We certainly welcome you. We welcome you and thank you for joining us every week. Again, it's 13ways.ca, and that's not California, that's Canada. And you can get in touch with Doug that way. His consulting firm has engineers and different people involved so that you not only can get a presentation, you can get somebody in to help you actually get your game plan together. And again, thank you, Doug, for doing that. And,
thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting us to our home. Local government is where your life happens. Be part of the solution. We'll see you next week on the County Seat.